The Spellplague, a goddess murdered, the weave shattered, and our world thrown into chaos. But what if there is far more to the story than has been told? Something distant, darker, and as ancient as the concept of time. Vanished gods, lost nations, and warped timelines. The truth has been cloaked in misinformation and lies far too long. It's all hidden in plain sight. Scholars missed the clues, but we didn't. Are you ready to uncover what really sparked a darkest hour and continues to threaten the Forgotten Realms? Then buckle up. It's time to shine some light on a most inconvenient and twisted truth. The Spellplague was never really about magic. It was a rewriting of the realm's history. Welcome to D&D Declassified. If you enjoy and/or find any value in these long-form essays, perhaps consider showing your support over on my Patreon, where I have an ever-growing collection of world-building resources to populate and enhance your adventures and worlds. You can check it all out for free and join with zero obligation. You don't have to spend a dime unless you want to. Links are below, and a sincere thank you to my supporters that make this video possible. The Spellplague, as recounted by 4th edition texts, holds the unenvious position as one of the most controversial times in the history of Realms lore, reshaping not just the world of Toril, but the very foundation that governs all things magical. The accepted and mainstream account of the Spellplague shamelessly tells us that this realm-shaking series of events are all attributed to and a direct result of the Goddess of Magic's death in 1385 Dale Reckoning, a heinous assassination by a tandem of evil gods that caused the structure of our world's magic, the weave, to break down. This collapse is said to have unleashed storms of blue fire that spread across the realms, devastating entire regions in its wake. Magic became unstable, nations were destroyed, and entire lands plagued beyond recognition. As each of these disasters ravaged our realms, almost unbelievably, yet another historical event would soon follow. A foreign world arrived within the crystal sphere to merge with our own, dramatically shifting planes, introducing entirely new species, and drastically altering the geography of our lands, while entire pantheons of gods simply vanished from existence, as though they never existed. The official narrative holds that the totality of these calamities, each causing separate widespread destruction and perhaps most notably the near-complete erasure of nearly a century from our calendars, were all the unfortunate consequences of the weave's collapse. The learned historians and scholars want us to believe that this was all the result of the murder of one deity. But ask yourself this: how does the death of a single goddess rewrite a realm's entire reality? We have been deceived, whether by ignorance, omission, or manipulation, rests in the unknown and with each of you. But this cosmic conspiracy is only just beginning to unravel. There exists a deeper truth, and we are here to find it. The fall of the foundation of realms magic, called the Weave, was marked by the brutal assassination of Mystra, the goddess of magic, in the year of Blue Flames, 1385 Dale Reckoning, and is commonly recognized to be the flashpoint that unleashed a series of unprecedented disasters that modern sages have collectively labeled the Spellplague, or as others have noted, the Storm of Blue Flames. It was not long after this calamity first overwhelmed our world that most historians rushed to judgment in accepting the notion that Mystra's death and the subsequent failure of the weave she controlled were the singular cause for what is among the most chaotic of times in the historical record. And this narrative has remained largely uncontested, supported by sages and scribes that have written volumes on the destruction wrought in the Spellplague's aftermath. Yet, upon examination of these written accounts, we quickly find that the widely accepted chronicle of events leaves far more questions than it provides answers. It is a convenient story, seamlessly fitting into a narrative of a world where seemingly everything is tethered to the ebb and flow of magic and the fate of the singular goddess who controls it. But as our evidence will demonstrate today, convenience and truth often make strange bedfellows. To peel back the layers of this onion of lies, we must first reject the surface-level explanation that the loss of the weave alone could account for such world-splintering destruction. And to start that journey of discovery, allow me to first present Exhibit A. Mystra has died before, twice in fact. First her sacrifice in negative 339 Dale Reckoning, the year of Sundered Webs, thanks to the wizard and would-be god responsible for the fall of Netheril, the most arrogant Lord Karsus, and again over a millennia later at the hands of Helm during the Time of Troubles, occurring just 27 years prior to this Spellplague event in 1358, the Year of Shadows. Yet each time previously, her demise occurred without any such far-reaching devastation. The various mages of the realms may have briefly struggled in the practice of their craft, but the fundamental structure of magic held, and there were no blue storms of spellfire sweeping across the realms and leaving plagues and death in its wake. However, the scourge that followed her third death went far beyond any negative impacts that could logically or even reasonably be placed upon the magical fabric of the realms. The devastation and massive upheaval that was experienced raises an obvious but profound question. If Mystra's death alone could in any way be responsible, then why did her prior deaths not bring about similar, unparalleled fallout? The answer is obvious. Mystra's death is only a fraction of the story. Yet in the official histories, we are asked to accept that the unraveling of the weave was responsible for erasing entire pantheons of deities, shifting the various outer planes across the multiverse, breaking cosmologies and laying waste to large regions of our realms such as the Shar, Halrua, and Mulharan, just to name a few. We are expected to believe that the death of a singular goddess not only crippled magic, but also reshaped the geography of our lands, introduced new and unfamiliar races, such as the Dragonborn, and even materialized, out of thin air I might add, a strange new doppelganger world called Abir to merge with our own. These questions, glossed over or ignored completely in official texts, cast sufficient doubt that challenging the accepted but highly improbable narrative is not only warranted, but in fact responsible. And if all that was not cataclysmic enough, just to pour fuel on this raging inferno of misinformation, we have what is quite possibly the most egregious aspect of the fraud that is the official historical record. A realm's timeline that simply lost nearly a century, despite some diligent and truly sinister efforts by bad actors, unreliable narrators, acts of suppression, or just maybe some truly malignant affliction to distort this truth. These disasters, each one a realm-shaking calamity unto itself, converged upon our world in the year 1385 and explained, hand-waved in many respects, despite obvious inconsistencies, mysterious gaps, and a myriad of unanswered questions, all of which brings us to the heart of today's Realms Conspiracy. The sum total of this collective ruin leaves far too many mysteries unexplored and unexplained. This, along with the suggestion of the weave as a single catalyst, strains credibility and forces us to look beyond and consider a more insidious possibility. That perhaps those ensuing disasters that authors have labeled the Spellplague were in fact a separate event involving distant, darker forces seeking to infiltrate our world with ill intent. I speak of the ancient aberrant powers of the Far Realm. Our theory today posits and will provide evidence supporting that through the weave's shattering, the boundaries and protections safeguarding Toril had become weakened, creating vulnerabilities exploited by Far Realm powers to breach our world. Because one thing is certain, even taking an objective view from one of the most significant times in the history of our realms, you can only be left with one unmistakable conclusion. There is far more to this story than has been told. Beyond the distant reaches of the multiverse, past planes governed by the known gods, lies a place that defies all logic and reason. It is known to us as the Far Realm, and it is a plane so alien, so fundamentally wrong, that its very existence challenges the concepts of reality. It is a dimension where the laws of physics are mutable and distorted, where reality folds onto itself and then shatters under the weight of the anarchy that permeates its endless stratum. Within its boundaries, time and gravity adhere to no known mortal laws, and the mind simply breaks, fractured by a perverse madness that here operates as a fundamental truth. Even the physical properties of the far realm are difficult to comprehend. It is a realm of infinite layers, separated by miles in some cases, only inches in others, yet each remains impossibly vast. The far realm exists as a world where continuity and reason hold no authority. It's a domain that makes our outer plane of pandemonium seem positively serene. Movement here is not only achieved by physical exertion, but also by the sheer power of thought, and the atmosphere, if you can call it that, is thick and viscous, making even the simplest actions feel like a desperate struggle against an unseen force. I think it is safe to say that few are those who have glimpsed the insanity of horrors of what is by all accounts a realm of perpetual and unwaking nightmares. Yet despite its almost incomprehensible distance from our world, residing far outside our multiverse, the Far Realm has always held a veiled connection to the Forgotten Realms, a fact clearly evidenced by the many aberrant creature types that inhabit the dungeons, lands, and ocean depths of our world. And it is from this plane of abject horrors where ancient forces have lurked for eons, patiently waiting for the right moment to breach the boundaries of our world in order to establish a beachhead and spread its own signature form of fear and derangement across the entirety of the multiverse. And that very moment may well have already arrived with the shattering of the weave in 1385, facilitating an insidious infiltration that some say is ongoing to this day. For countless millennia, our realms were safeguarded by the protective barriers that Mistress Weave maintained. This structure, a framework supporting the wondrous gifts of the arcane, does not only bind, filter, and amplify magic, it reinforces the very fabric of reality within realm space. However, the demise of the goddess of magic and the deterioration of her weave that soon followed provided a perfect storm of opportunity for ancient powers to breach our world as those protective barriers crumbled. And if this theory proves true, the implications are nothing short of staggering. The Far Realm is one of the few planes of existence that reside outside the structure of the known cosmos, placing it beyond the reach of the crystal sphere that encloses realm space and even the divine influence of the supreme overgod Lord Ao. Therefore, if the realms have been afflicted by a dark incursion from forces originating in that realm of madness, then even divine protection by the Faerunian gods may be called into question. And with a plane that exhibits such impossible properties, it is not a stretch to imagine that the entities potentially responsible for such an assault on the material plane are both immensely powerful and as incomprehensible as the realm itself. Entities such as the nightmare-inducing Uvudam to the many godlike elder evils who hold dominion over this realm of delirium. Any of these, or perhaps some unknown, never-before-encountered Lovecraftian-type evils may be among the culprits accountable for this ongoing and unprovoked aggression. However, what should be most terrifying is the intent of these cosmic horrors. Their desire goes beyond power or domination. They already have that in spades. What they truly seek is to unravel our reality, to twist and taint the planes they touch until they are utterly unrecognizable. For them, invasion is not about conquest, but corruption, the warping of worlds they encounter into reflections of their own twisted domain. Mystra's assassination and the breakdown of the weave was not the cause of the Spellplague, but it did allow the destructive forces of Far Realm energies to spill unchecked onto our realms, distorting realities, bending time, and warping magic in ways that are lawless by their very nature. Where they touch, only madness follows. Continuing our examination of the evidence, I offer the puzzle box that is Exhibit B, the 92-year gap in the calendars of the Forgotten Realms found amid the ruin and aftermath of the so-called Spellplague, one of the most glaring of the many inconsistencies we are going to uncover today. Let us start with the agreed-upon facts. Spoiler alert, there are not many. The Spellplague event began in 1385 Del Reckoning, and the mainstream narrative tells us it lasted precisely a decade, ending in 1395. That's it. There's nothing else in the historical record that logic or reason should allow us to accept. Because when we open our history books to review the chronicle of events in this area, we find a world that has suddenly fast-forwarded to 1479 Dale Reckoning, with 92 years in between having simply vanished. Actually, now that I think about it, using the term fast-forward is a gross misrepresentation. This was not a 92-year skip or jump that materialized overnight, or in a flash of light as though it was a fever dream. Those 92 years are presumed to have passed normally, day by day, year by year. People lived, aged, and died, children were born, and life continued as it always had. Except that the written histories for this era of calamity suggest the entire world was struck by a massive worldwide delusion or some form of amnesia, all of which the accepted history tells us originated from the breakdown of the magical weave, a notion that, given any critical thought and analysis, is actually quite absurd. However, what should be more troubling to all across the realm are the proverbial blank pages of our history books that chronicle that 92-year gap. Now, as we look to untangle this mystery, we must first, at the outset, confront an apparent contradiction. If these years are truly blank, why do we possess any historical records from this period at all? It is a fair question, because at first glance, one might easily contend that this period is, in fact, documented, if somewhat sparse, filled with events and occurrences that seemingly bridge this gap of nearly a century in question. While histories from this era are noted in the realm's libraries and archives, it is their veracity and the circumstances under which they were produced that must be scrutinized. There are many organizations dedicated to chronicling the many histories and cultures of our realm, from the famed scholars of Candlekeep, the heralds of Faerun, and the Harpers, to the priestly scribes of Denir, the royal historians of Cormyr, and of course the lore masters from the Church of Ogma, the realm's deity of knowledge. Each of these groups, among many others too numerous to list, have long been respected and revered for their meticulous record-keeping and the preservation of realm's knowledge. Yet, upon close examination of the pages recorded during this 92-year gap, a troubling but consistent theme is easily spotted. The historical entries inscribed by these esteemed organizations are curiously marked by their scarcity, vagueness, and a pervasive lack of corroborating evidence. Further, many of these events show conspicuous signs of being recorded years, even decades after their supposed occurrence, and a majority present as trivial or mundane. This is in stark contrast to the comprehensive, timely, and exhaustive models long established by these institutions, clearly illustrated in their work found before and after the time gap in question. As we examine these accounts, this anomaly at least suggests that these histories may not reflect a true representation or reality, consisting of altered or fabricated records of actual occurrence and are instead the product of compromised or unreliable narrators. So it is only prudent that we consider the possibility that the scholars and scribes within these authoritative groups were subjected to some form of influence or corruption, whether through coercion, bribery, or perhaps the insidious manipulation by far realm energies. If, as our theory suggests, agents of the far realm infiltrated our world, they would certainly possess the capability to corrupt key individuals or entire organizations responsible for documenting our realm's history. The most perfidious of these aberrant corruption scenarios to consider is the notion of collective memory manipulation. As a plane of madness, the Far Realm is known for its capacity to warp minds and fracture realities. This threat could have a realm-wide residual effect manifesting as memory loss, vivid hallucinations, or even the implanting of false memories across the populace at large. If our entire population, or even just those institutions that hold sway in chronicling the passage of time, were compromised by such psychic tampering, the events documented as having transpired during this time shift and present in our history books might very well be nothing more than a mosaic of misinformation, lies, and falsehoods, an illusionary mark of any true events taking place during this questionable era. Any collective delusions recorded as history would, in this scenario, be the byproducts of minds warped by exposure to distant, otherworldly forces. Such widespread psychological impact would cast significant doubt on the validity of the events documented. Another meta-theory asks us to consider the potential that these powerful far realm entities may have afflicted our world with temporal distortions and anomalies, only further complicating any accurate recording of a true history. With a deluge of alien psychic energies engulfing our world amid a decaying weave, could the fabric of time have been fractured, leading to cyclical loops, overlapping timelines, or distorted recollections? Attempting to document such a confusing and chaotic period would find those efforts thwarted by the very nature of such instability of time, plausibly resulting in splintered or contradictory accounts, despite an illusion of continuity. This meta-theory is only bolstered by yet another tragedy falsely attributed to Mystra's demise, the merging of a foreign world with Toril. The sudden and unannounced arrival of a beer could have resulted in a time blending of parallel realities, potentially exacerbated if not orchestrated by far realm interference. This would not only account for the altered geography of Toril, but also intertwine each world's disparate histories. The consequences of this scenario could lead to recorded events reflecting occurrences from a beer or a hybrid of both worlds, rather than a true history of our realms. In analyzing these meta-theories, a consistent pattern still emerges. The histories recorded in this 92-year gap are fraught with suspicious, glaring inconsistencies and unverifiable accounts. The convergence of any combination of these connections suggests a concerted effort by distant and malevolent powers intent on corrupting well-meaning historians or perhaps an entire populace. All part of a grand conspiracy to erase or obscure the true accounting of events that this theory contends is ongoing to this day. An unseen invasion of distant horrors, unbound and unchecked, to contaminate the realities of our forgotten realms. The involvement of Shar and Cyric in the Spellplague has never been challenged by the conventional narrative, where they play a semi-starring role as antagonists in the treachery. While our theory refutes much of the official account of the Spellplague, we do find agreement in saying that the breakdown of the weave was the catalyst that set off the chain of disastrous events that were to follow. So you will find no argument here. Shar was indeed a key conspirator in Mystra's murder, brought on through her manipulation of the already inimical and most certainly insane god Cyric, who performed the dirty deed. However, lurking in the shadows of their undisputed roles in this drama are deeper facets yet untold. What if Cyric and Shar were the unwitting pawns of a larger scheme, blinded by their own ambitions and leveraged for or even manipulated by those ancient, aberrant powers of the Far Realm? The culmination of their plot most certainly caused the weave to fail, which was Shar's intent. But could it be that this was also precisely the opening the Far Realm intruders had patiently waited millennia for? We will be coming back to explore Shar's role in Chapter 7, but for the moment, let's focus our auditing of this era by investigating the emerging theories that suggest the rift into our world may have occurred within the realm of the Supreme Throne, becoming the gateway to accommodate such an extraterrestrial breach. To make the theory's case as the potential genesis of the Incursion, we need to better understand this domain of Cyric, also referred to as the Shattered Castle. The Supreme Throne is located in the outer planes of our world, a realm found on the second layer of Pandemonium and called Cocytus. And it is this plane's location and inherent properties that are presented as Exhibit C of our theory. You see, Pandemonium, and specifically Cocytus, is remarkably one of the few places on the material plane that can even begin to approach the natural environment of the Far Realm. Cocytus is a plane characterized by its own labyrinthine tunnels and never-ending winds measured on mortal scales in terms of hurricane-type levels. However, the most defining feature of Cocytus is its known ability to cause madness in those unfortunate enough to visit. And while the lore does confirm that the Supreme Throne would eventually become the 1,000-year prison for Cyric's role in Mystra's demise, those accounts also corroborate the Mad God's confinement would take place after any breach had already occurred. Continuing along our trail of perfect storm-like conditions and convergent circumstance, this isolation, meant as a safeguard, may have inadvertently contributed to transforming the Supreme Throne into an ideal conduit for external threats. The canonical text describes Cyric's domain as a realm detached from the moral and physical laws that typically govern other planes, coursing with its own chaotic and treacherous energies that would harmoniously resonate in tune with elements native to the far realm. This inherent instability would well align with conditions presenting a potential vulnerability even before accounting for the collapse of the weave. So when the weave did break down, the fragility of this weak point would only be further exposed. Additional circumstantial evidence also points to unusual fluctuations reported on Cocytus around the time of the Spellplague. Archival records maintained by the Harpers note disturbances emanating from Cyric's realm during this time, distortions that coincide with reports of maddening whispers and visions haunting those who dared to scry into the Supreme Throne. At the time, given Cyric's own well-documented insanity as the Mad God, those disturbances may have been discarded. But looking back, they suggest the possibility that an otherworldly eruption starting in the outer planes was currently underway. The known chaotic essence of the plane itself might have even acted as a beacon, amplified by the weave's deterioration and perhaps communicated by co-conspirators from the depths of Toral's oceans, all potentially drawing the Uvadam and/or Elder Evils who echo and certainly align with madness and disorder. Deep beneath the mighty oceans, inland seas, and grand lakes of Toril, far from the gaze of mortals, the Aboleth have long waited and watched. These ancient beings are among the oldest in the multiverse, predating even the gods. And there exists compelling evidence that the Abolethic sovereignty, the only known organization on Toril with long-standing and deep ties to the Far Realm, as willing conspirators in this aberrant invasion. Canonical lore across the various editions of text has never truly agreed on the exact origins of the Aboleth, fitting for such an ancient and mysterious creature. Stated as unknown in the 3rd edition and declared as definitely hailing from the Far Realm in the 4th, the native homeland of the Aboleth has evolved over time. As the lore of our realm moved into the 5th edition, the general consensus does allow us to confirm that these aliens of the deep are indeed Far Realm creatures, although the 5e texts have softened up some of the de facto claims made in 4th edition. Regardless, as creatures with a strong heritage to that realm of madness, their connection to aberrant energies and knowledge of realities beyond the crystal sphere of realm space is unparalleled among other beings on Toril. These far realm allies operate from the soaring city of Shifu, hovering ominously above the sea of fallen stars. As Exhibit D in our evidence chain, we find lore that has long confirmed the Abolethic sovereignty's ultimate ambition, uncanny in alignment with our own hypothesis, to unseal a rift and unleash the Far Realm Masters upon our world. There are multiple accounts from the Candlekeep archives, the Clerics of Ogma, and even the Red Wizards of Thay that each offer various reports of agents loyal to the sovereignty, showing a keen interest in the many sites touched by the effects of the Spellplague. And in texts preserved by the Druidic lore keepers of the Emerald Enclave, there are accounts observing the practice of esoteric rituals involving ancient glyphs linked to the Far Realm. Such activities have too long been dismissed as the mere curious study of the disasters that plagued the lands. However, in the view of our theory, these activities appear to have actually augmented the spread of Far Realm influence. Central to this meta-theory is the Symphony of Madness, a ritualistic, telepathic hymn crafted by these most ancient and original of Aboleths. This arcane melody, a ritual spell casting taking the form of song, is suspected of serving as a conduit for those ancient powers of insanity, forging a harmonious incantation capable of warping reality. The symphony is believed to have a symbiotic relationship with the Storm of Blue Flames, further suggesting a sinister link with the Far Realm. The lore also confirms to us that those who became part of the symphony's choir were transformed by its exposure, and the theory posits these choir members then acted as living amplifiers for this hymn of madness, their minds and bodies irrevocably altered to resonate with the aberrant frequencies of the Far Realm. Perhaps the most compelling evidence in support of this Abolethic facet of our hypothesis arises from the depths under the city of Neverwinter located in the northwest of Faerun, specifically the Cauldron of Blue Fire. This subterranean plague-land lake, whose waters exceed depths of 500 feet, has been documented as a focal point for aberrant activity during the Spellplague, with witness accounts and sightings of aboleths within its dark azure depths conducting unknown rites and rituals. In our view, there are simply too many activities attributed to the Abolethic sovereignty and easily aligned to our own hypothesis to be mere chance or coincidence. The exact details or depths of their aid may never be known, but they were involved, and the Spellplague conspiracy theory suggests their role may be ongoing. The canonical lore has established that the Nightbringer Shar's jealous ambition to control Mistress Weave drove her to conspire in the assassination of the goddess of magic. This vile act by a truly evil goddess was a calculated act meant to destabilize the Weave in order for Shar to make her claim on the domain. However, our theory maintains the Dark Lady of Loss would not have initially been aware of the Far Realm invasion plans that her actions and those of Cyric would enable. Amid the chaos of the unfolding disasters to follow, few would comprehend the true nature of the disaster. That said, Shar may have been one of the very few entities who was uniquely positioned to discern the underlying forces at play and recognize, soon after the breach had occurred, that the Spellplague calamity was not as the official accounts would declare, but instead had taken the form of a coordinated incursion bent on spreading the distortions and insanity of the Far Realm across the multiverse. However, we must remember that the Mistress of the Night is a 100% evil-aligned goddess, so true to her nature, as the mind-warping energies of the Far Realm began to erupt upon the material plane, she selfishly chose to harness the maddening chaos for her own empowerment rather than attempting to seal the breach or alert other deities to the invasion. Ever the opportunist, Shar, realizing she would not be able to take control of the Weave, did recognize an opportunity to still capitalize on the impending disaster. By directing her own dark divine powers within Cyric's domain of Cocytus, Shar leveraged the emerging disruptive energies. This deliberate convergence allowed her to coalesce her Shadow Weave with fragments of the negative energy plane, the plane of shadow, and various demi-planes of dread. Despite the goddess's manipulation of this situation, it remains uncertain whether Shar could have created the Shadowfell as we know it today without tapping into those insane-inducing aberrant forces. Exhibit E is the assertion that the infusion of Far Realm negative energies were not only pivotal but required in the genesis of a Shadowfell that now mirrors a dark echo of the material plane. Only with the benefit and aid of alien powers, and only during the blackout of the Weave, would the Dark Goddess find herself positioned in the rarest of narrow windows, where she would possess such massive cosmic powers as to allow not only the creation of a new plane of existence, but also the ability to imbue this nascent and reformed shadow plane with a distorted reflection of reality in the captured dark echo of the material plane. Shar's role was one of opportunistic evil, her assassination plot being an inadvertent catalyst of the looming disaster. Nonetheless, through selfish exploitation of ancient energies, Shar not only reshaped the plane of shadow in her own image, but is likely one of the very few among gods or mortals that somehow benefited from such a tragic disaster, ensuring the Singer of Eternal Night has an enduring influence in a post-Spellplague era. Our final supporting exhibit is found in a conversation documented in the novel Plague of Spells by Bruce R. Cordell. There you will find the protagonist of the story, a monk named Raiden Kane, engaging with a sentient construct named Cynosure Prime. Cynosure tells of a distant and powerful entity, only known as the Traitor, who in 1396 Dale Reckoning, which would have been 11 years after the emergence of the Storm of Blue Fire, escaped from its confinement in the dungeons of Stardeep. In their discussion, the construct muses on the true nature of the Spellplague and is quoted as follows. Many threads were pulled when Mystra died. Most except the goddess of magic's death touched off already unsteady zones of wild magic. But in the past, when the previous goddess of magic perished, no Spellplague resulted. I believe other factors contributed to the virulence of what finally occurred. Perhaps the Spellplague was a necessary ingredient, required to condition reality enough to permit the great old Aboleths to return. Perhaps the year of blue fire was so virulent that it reactivated previously dormant fossil dimensions." End quote. The construct's words hint at deeper and distant machinations that fit almost perfectly in our own conspiratorial narrative. The mention of other factors and the conditioning of reality align strongly with the idea of a deliberate weakening of the planar boundaries as part of a possible incursion. Additionally, the reference to reactivating fossil dimensions could easily be interpreted as the Far Realm, and it would not be a leap to suggest the identification of this traitor as a potential agent of the Far Realm powers, such as the Uvadam or even an Elder Evil. To many, the Spellplague is seen as a calamity that has run its course, now mostly resolved with the restoration of the Weave. However, this view is dangerously naive, providing no answers as to why so many active wounds remain, and it underestimates the true nature of what has occurred, and more importantly, what may yet be to come. Have we misattributed the cause of one of the most significant events in recent history? Perhaps, and the implications would be profound, suggesting that the realms are far more vulnerable to external threats than previously believed. And one question still remains. Despite the claim of disasters quelled, long buried beneath the complacency of many historians is the very real possibility that events we call the Spellplague were only the beginning. While the magical weave has returned to stability, the energies unleashed during this plagued era have not simply vanished. Mystra's death may have set off a chain reaction of sinister events far beyond the destabilization of magic. It ruptured the boundaries between planes, creating an opening through which the discordant energies of the Far Realm may have been allowed to infiltrate our world. This breach establishing a symbiotic or perhaps even parasitic bond with the Weave that may well exist to this day, hints of which can be found in the ongoing presence of wild and dead magic zones that still dot the landscapes of Faerun. Practitioners of the arcane arts still routinely report that magic feels different, somehow more unpredictable. Further evidence that perverse influences have become embedded in and are continuing to erode the foundation of magic and the safety of our realm. While some attribute these fluctuations as aftershocks of a Spellplague, the evidence at least suggests that these may be the repercussions of a fundamentally altered, perhaps even contaminated ecosystem of magic. In the estimation of this theory, the evidence suggests that the storms of blue fire that consumed Toril were a manifestation of the Far Realm's weight, an affliction that reshaped continents, erased deific pantheons, destroyed nations, and caused permanent distortions of time that cannot possibly or plausibly be explained by the collapse of the Weave. All these remnant scars are places where the Far Realm energies remain active, illuminating their sinister fingerprints as they warp time and reality in their continued infection. We close out this conspiracy theory with a dire warning. Our world stands at a precipice. The restoration of the Weave may have brought temporary respite, but that is a two-edged sword. That relief also serves as a clever facade, an illusion that all is well while true dangers still lurk unseen with unknown but certainly evil intents. The realms must prepare for what is to come, the Spellplague was not the last disaster, but the opening act of a much larger and far more dangerous cosmic opera. The Far Realms hold is still growing, its ultimate objectives not yet realized, but our world is now vulnerable to further calamities far greater than anything it has faced before, and this time the consequences may not be so easily undone. Even the gods, distracted by their own divine games and petty ambitions, seem almost unaware or unwilling to address the full scope of this threat. Perhaps the Far Realms' blight has embedded itself so deeply that even divine intervention cannot fully cleanse it. If true, this raises a truly disturbing question about the future of our realms. If the gods cannot protect us, who can? I hope you enjoyed this first volume of D&D Declassified. It's a series that I personally would love to see enter the channel's rotation, but really that's up to each of you. I know it's a little different and skirts on the fringes of homebrew, but I do want to reiterate that everything covered today is deeply connected to published lore and was heavily researched across official resources, Dungeon & Dragon magazine articles, adventures, and novels, all in an effort to make the theories highly plausible, which only makes getting your feedback critical, as the community's thoughts are very important to me. So love it, hate it, not sure, or anything in between, please let me know down in the comments. A special thank you to my YouTube channel members and my supporters over on Patreon who, through their amazing support, make this video possible. If you'd like to support my work, it's a win-win by joining my Patreon, where I have an ever-growing collection of DM and world-building resources. So check it all out over on my Patreon. Join for free, no obligation. At the very least, it's a great way for me to interact with each of you. Links below. And finally, if you think I earned it, please like and subscribe. Thank you for listening, and until next time, remember, the only limitation at your table is your imagination.